on average $1.5 million what it would cost to build out their entire system. And that includes modernization, so taking their legacy system and modernizing it. But in 2026, it's 88% cheaper than what it used to be.
Adam, in 2026, we are seeing the world change, so to speak, as cliche as it sounds, with software engineering and rebuilding legacy applications. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, Jake, I think when we first started talking to people, probably 80% of the time we were saying, go get something off the shelf. You really should try to find a pre-existing tool before trying to build custom. Because on average, $1.5 million is probably somewhere in the middle of the average on what it would cost a company to build out their entire system from scratch, from custom. And that includes modernization, so taking their legacy system and modernizing it. $1.5 million is not a small investment, right? Like, you need to be really, really sure that you're getting some return on that. But in 2026, I think that we're seeing that the cost is closer to $120,000, $250,000, somewhere in that range. And that's, if you do the math on that, that's 88% cheaper than what it used to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're getting a better system out of that. Like, a lot of times you are getting a system that's more secure. You're getting a system that's faster. You're getting more of the features that you want. And that's because we're not having to make as many trade-offs just based on how long it takes to implement code and ship it out to users. So I think the math on whether you should get something off the shelf or whether you build it in-house is really, really rapidly changing.
Agreed. And for those who are wondering, who are we? We're the co-founders of Pilot West Studios here out of Nashville, Tennessee. So we have US-based developers that build custom software for other businesses, particularly specializing in manufacturing, distribution, logistics, and some agriculture recently, just based off demand. So when we're thinking about this in our experience, this isn't just a theoretical based off numbers, but with myself running the client side and sales and marketing and operations, and Adam as our CTO, leading the technical side of actually rebuilding these applications and overseeing it. This is from a real perspective of having conversations with dozens of business owners, every year, if not hundreds, and understanding what's occurring, how things are shifting, and actually what does the implementation look like when it's done well. But it is interesting to note, like, when we think about why are things changing, when we think about the landscape of software engineering, again, being a business that builds software for other software or for other businesses, is originally when you were a company trying to rebuild a legacy application, what would you have to do? Well, you had to be a pretty decent size because, for example, we have a client of ours that's a 9-figure distributor, and when they were in the 7 figures, so much smaller before they really started taking off, they had to rebuild one of their older applications due to some things changing in that industry. And so they had to rebuild everything they were doing to be compliant and as well as give the application more of a lifespan. But what occurred is they reached out to an agency to rebuild their application, and they heard, okay, it's going to be $1 million in a year. It ended up being over $2 million in 2 years later, which is common even now, even though this was like 10, 15 years ago. And so that was the landscape that, as a business owner, you just kind of have to bite the bullet and go, okay, is this worth, if I'm spending 7 figures, is this going to be worth 8 figures or 9 figures, considering this is the backbone of my business? Well, now it's less of a 7-figure investment and less of a enterprise or medium-sized business decision where only those who could afford to play in the 7-figure ballpark of building software could really consider it. And especially considering that now you can do the same things even better for a fraction of the cost. It's also interesting to understand that when you look at from the perspective of when we talk to other business owners and they felt like they couldn't find the right solution off the shelf, it is difficult. Either your business isn't tailored or your business is operates in a specific way that something off the shelf doesn't meet, and or even if it did fit and it did everything you wanted it to, taking 20, 30, 40 years of data from your old system into an off-the-shelf solution can be really challenging, if not impossible, where the vendor may not even support it. So you get into this weird situation where you kind of feel like custom's the only answer for some people, but they still think, well, I can't afford 7 figures to do this. And now, I mean, in the past year, we're seeing, okay, this is much different than it used to be.
Yeah, and another thing that you don't hear a lot of people talking about is where does that cost efficiency come from? Like why is it so much cheaper now? Well, it's not because developers are charging less. If anything, the best developers are charging more, and that's because they're able to deliver so much value in such a short amount of time that, for example, like billing hourly, it does not make any sense. So, if you find a developer that's billing hourly, there's a very high chance that they are not taking advantage of these AI efficiencies. A huge cost of the before times, let's call it, was that in order to accurately map your business processes into software, you would need a team of 5, 6, 10, 100 people, right? Just depending on how big your business is, but like certainly more than one person. That's just not the case anymore. With AI tooling, I mean, we will go walk the floor of a business recording audio, and we will record that audio. By the time we get done walking the floor, we'll have over 10 hours of audio, asking questions, seeing things that they present to us, hearing in their own words, them repeating the problem back to us and stating how things work, telling us how things should work, but currently don't work. And we have all of that information at our fingertips. That goes into an AI transcription layer where then we can basically just say, hey, here are the key problems that we have to solve. And now a single engineer who doesn't need to coordinate, doesn't need to re-explain things to the designer or the project manager. They don't have to go ask other people for context updates. One person can ship that code. They can communicate with the key stakeholders in the business. They're just things that in the before times, it took a ton of organization and communication to make these things happen. And while communication, of course, is still a critical skill for any business, when you only have one person that basically needs to know everything related to building the software, it goes so much faster and it's so much smoother, and it saves you a ton of time when it comes to the actual implementation of that business's software.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that can be said about a 7-figure business all the way up to a 9-figure business. So this isn't just in a vacuum of, well, that's nice, but that's not applicable to me. No, this is applicable across company sizes. And I think an important thing to note, Adam, is that this is a phenomena that has been recorded for a while now, because for those who are non-technical, business owners and operators, they might think, well, more is better. If I get more developers, right, I can move faster. Explain a little bit more of that myth and where that comes from and how that's a documented phenomena for decades.
Well, I'll point out that the old phrase is not there's too many developers in the kitchen. It's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? We've known for a really long time that throwing more resources at a problem does not always, it doesn't make it faster. It rarely makes it more efficient. So there's kind of the less is more approach here. When you have one person who is deeply skilled at this process of discovery, articulating your problems, and then understanding what technology do we have at our disposal to make these problems go away, you eliminate a whole class of communication related errors, right? There's an old book that don't quote me on this. I want to say it was written in the 80s, but
70s,
it was called
actually.
Was it The Mythical Man Month?
Yes.
Okay, so we've known about this problem for a really long time. You cannot ask 9 women to have a single baby in 1 month, right? Like that's just not how it works. There are some things that are just, they're consecutive and they take time. And there are some things that are consecutive and take time. And the more people you add, the more time it takes because of those communication delays, because of assumptions and preconceived notions, like all these things that have to be worked out in communication. When there's only one person to communicate with, all those problems just go away. So I think it has always been the case that a single developer that owns an entire code base by themselves is more effective and more efficient. It just used to be economies of scale. You simply could not type out the solution fast enough and then test it fast enough and then come up with a design that looks, reasonably pleasing to the eye. One person could not do all that work. That is no longer the case. And so now the next efficiency that you can gain is to remove all the redundant personnel that used to be needed to do these things. One person, one skilled developer can do all these things now.
Is there anything that's that you would say is contributing to making this easier to do now more than ever? So we've talked about AI development, what a single developer can do, how custom software development's coming down from enterprise and medium-sized businesses all the way down to SMB. Is there anything else that's contributing to that?
I think AI is definitely the driver of all of this. As we, the society at large and the industry of software developers, as we become better at utilizing AI, as we find new workflows. For example, I mentioned the one where we record audio and we use that kind of as our source of truth. I mean, it's directly from our clients' mouths. That's a technique, right? And actually, we had meeting transcriptions long before we had AI. But what AI gave us the ability to do was basically to comb through a 2-hour meeting. And instead of us having to read it and synthesize it and make sense of it all, we can now have an AI pull out the most important points. We can have it comb back through it and say, hey, here's what we built. Go look at the meeting. Did we miss anything? Was there anything that they noted that we kind of skimmed over? So what we've gained is the ability to compress a massive amount of information and then produce something from that. So compress that meeting, produce software from it, or compress 5 or 6 meetings and produce software from it. That is an artifact of AI, but it's mostly a workflow. So I think as AI models become more powerful, I think as they become smaller and we can fit them on device and we can do increasingly cool things on device with our AI assistants, I think we're going to find more workflows, and it's going to just keep trending the same way. One well-staffed expert who really understands these workflows and understands how to use these tools is going to continue to be able to do more. So ironically, this might be the first time in history where waiting might actually be a valid strategy. If you've been putting off rebuilding your legacy system for 10 years, what's waiting another year, right? It's already 88% cheaper than it used to be. What will it be next year? You're probably going to have some diminishing returns. Like it's not going to become 100% cheaper, I don't think. But what's the difference between 88% cheaper and 90% cheaper? For your business, it might really matter, right? For most people, it probably doesn't. But I think we can continue to see this trend where one very well-versed expert is essentially wearing an exoskeleton now, right? The robots aren't doing this themselves. They're being directed by an expert who knows the technology available to them and is already a very deep expert in some domain, such as software.
Yeah. And what we try to bring with us, speaking of that exoskeleton, if you're a business owner trying to look for somebody to best impact your business, it's like Adam mentioned, not billing by the hour. So it's kind of the vehicle to make sure you have aligned incentives. But it's also someone who is utilizing these tools and understands your business, or at least understands your industry well, right? Because what makes us different in regards to how we operate in our business is like we really focus on moving quickly and ensuring that we're not spending, like most agencies, 2 or 3 months asking redundant questions, right? We really want to be well articulating the pain and problems and thorough, but at the same time really focusing on action, because at the end of the day, when we're not building for a year or two to ship out to somebody, we do a phased approach, which we also suggest if you're looking for someone else who's technical or developer. Phased approach makes the most sense, especially with these legacy system rebuilds, because that's how, for 98% of the situations, that's how you can ensure that little by little you can pull off redundancy, pull off dependency off of the old application, build new, begin to build that foundation of that new application, that new workflow, and then pull more and more off that old application to eventually phase it out entirely, where there's no huge migration, there's no huge turn off and turn on one thing to another, whether that be, you get like a big box SAP or NetSuite, or you get something off the shelf, or you build custom and you just do it for a year or two and then don't ship it until the last bit. All of that makes, I know, team members and business owners really concerned, as they should be, because things start breaking. Things weren't pressure tested. Things weren't thought through. And all of a sudden, it's chaotic for months as you try to work it all out. The phased approach helps kind of smooth out those rough edges and provides a way that you can really, in reality, build something that impacts your business and pulls some dependency off the legacy system in a few months, in 3 to 4 months, if you have a really good engineer who knows what they're doing. And then on top of that, again, when we're thinking about summarizing legacy system modernization, building a new system, it makes more sense because, again, it's more affordable than it ever has been. You're not only building like for like, right? For screen replication, but you are allowed to, or allows you to think through workflow opportunities of process improvements, so that if you're rebuilding anyways, you might as well make it a better experience for everyone. You can, the data migration, again, can usually be easier. And then also it allows you to move faster. So for all those reasons, for most people, that's why in 2026, it makes much more sense to consider rebuilding a legacy system than it did even just a year or two ago.
Yeah. And I think that on average, I believe we are showing an application, a functioning production application to our clients within 2 to 3 weeks. Now that's not functionally complete, right? We're still working on them, but we have something to show them that they can start clicking around and figuring out, does this actually feel better for my workflow within 2 to 3 weeks? There's no reason to not do that. There's no reason in keeping this thing a black box that you don't even look at for 6 months. That is absolutely a recipe for disaster, which is, what you're explaining with the phased approach. And I think one other thing that you and I have personally seen some software agencies lean too hard in is that while it might sound that we are just totally 100% pro AI, stuff AI into everything, we're actually not. We actually believe that AI belongs in very specific boxes where it is very well suited for its work. But, notice that I said we fly out and we walk the floor with our clients. That face-to-face human relation and making sure that we really understand the business that we're working in is huge. And you can't replace that with, you can't, I guess not yet. We might laugh at this in 5 years, but you can't send a robot to go walk your customer's manufacturing floor and record video and audio. That's just, you still have to be willing to put in the work, and it is work, to build human relations. Because at the end of the day, that is the backbone upon which all of these cool AI tools and workflows, they all hang off of this one core concept, which is that you have to deeply care and you have to be deeply involved with your client's business, understand what are the pains that they're feeling. You have to empathize. You have to feel, oh my gosh, yeah, I understand why this is so painful, because if I was in your shoes doing the same thing, I would hate this and I wouldn't want that. You know?
And if you had a bad experience with a software agency, it was the opposite of that, where they don't care, they're not communicative, and they don't keep you in the loop. They don't take accountability. Those are all stemming from those things.
Exactly. So using AI to do all of your written writing, that's not good. Not just because it's annoying to read and it's very obvious, but because it shows kind of a disrespect or a disdain for their time. And I'm not saying never use it. I use it a lot for drafting and getting first passes, but then I make sure that it actually sounds human, that it's okay, I agree with what's being said. I rewrite it. I take my time out of my day to show that I value the relationship. And the same thing was when you talk to Pilot West Studios, you will never get an AI chatbot, because an AI chatbot says, hey, you're not important enough for me to spend my human time talking to you, even though you're spending your human time trying to contact me. So I think that agencies that go too far down that path and get a little too overzealous, I think they're going to have to course correct one day. I think you really got to keep the human things first.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and something I was thinking about as well, because that's exactly right. As anyone watching this, they probably can empathize that AI is everywhere. And most of it's snake oil, most of it's marketing. And that's why even with our own marketing, we don't mention AI, even though AI is a big part of our business and how we operate. We recognize it's just the vehicle or tool that allows us to do what we can do more efficiently. But it's for someone reading, or for someone who needs help, or someone who's interested in working with us. It doesn't matter in our minds. And so when we're talking about what's good for a developer and maybe what's bad, if someone's really hyping up AI, or really confusing you with AI jargon and AI speak and LLM speak, then that's a really good indication that, okay, they're not able to think outside the technicalities of the
Yeah.
vehicle, and which we understand when we build, we focus hyper specifically on what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What does the business need to look like? And for any other developer that you may hire to do so, that's the perspective they need to have. They need to have accountability and empathy for what's going on in your business so they can reverse engineer a solution to do that through the right tooling. But if they're focused on the tooling, or they're just like if they're very specific about, well, we have to use Python and we have to use this, then it may not be the right person because they're focused too much on the tools and the frameworks rather than how do we actually achieve the result? How do we articulate first the result of what we need to head and have aligned incentives, right?
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you went to your mechanic and they just spent a lot of time talking about how they have this amazing floor jack and it picks up the car in like 2 seconds and we can get under the. It's like, that's great for you. I'm sure that makes your job way easier. Me as the client, I do not care. It's like that's great. And if you can do the job faster and you can pass those time savings or those money savings on to me, love it. Love that for you. But like, it would be very weird if in the marketing to talk to me as a customer, they were talking all about their floor jacks. It's like,
or no, like, oh, well, we use ratchet sets, bought by this company. And or what would be even weirder, which some of these developers do, is they're like, well, I was thinking about building this framework and use this backend, and they're talking to like a non-technical operator and they're like, I don't care, just make my problems go away. It'd be like if your mechanic was like, well, I could use adjustable wrench or I could use my ratchet set. What would you like for me to do? It's like, I don't care.
Whatever gets my car back to me sooner. And a little bit of translation there. If AI is going to help developers ship the right solution faster, incredible. I would prefer that you use that. But it is kind of weird to hinge all of your marketing on the fact that like, hey, we're using this tool that at the end of the day, you don't really care about how the sausage is made. You just want good sausage,
And on that
note, now that we've mixed 6 metaphors into over metaphorized.
Well, now that we talked about sausage, I think we got to wrap up. So anyways, summary. If you're someone who is trying to assess rebuilding a legacy system, like it truly, 2026 has been a very pivotal moment. As someone who's I roll my eyes saying this, but we are truly on the cutting edge of AI. We use all the new models when they come out. We are there. We live it every single day. But it's also important to realize is that even though we recognize this, that we're on the cutting edge, and that it's making the ability to build software easier, cheaper, make your business more efficient, there are still core fundamentals to what makes this easier that you have to focus on. So as you're evaluating, yes, focus on someone who's AI enabled, but it should not be the core to everything they do, because that's how legacy systems get built, and they turn into bloat, or they turn into things that don't affect your business because it's not focused on the right things. So the good news is the vehicle is faster than ever to do it, but it still reiterates the same core fundamentals of finding the right person. Thanks for watching.
Yep.